Do you know the pentatonic scale? And maybe some other scales or modes, but you want to take your playing to the next level and play changes or chase chords? You might ask, what scale should I focus on? The answer, none. The key to playing changes, no matter if you're playing rock, blues, jazz, or country, isn't scales. So if I could go back in time and tell my 20-year-old self to focus on one thing to be a better soloist, it would be this. Learn how to solo using the caged shapes. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the simple way to make practical use of the caged shapes when you're soloing. I've had countless students come to me over the years who spent a lot of time learning the caged shapes, but they got no return on that time investment because they didn't know how to actually use those caged shapes. What I want to share with you today is how to put those caged shapes into action when you are soloing. And I'm going to use a song by the band Steely Dan as an example. But first, what is caged? The caged system is a method for visualizing the fretboard using 5 open chord shapes: C, A, G, E, and D. These shapes can be moved up the neck as bar chords, creating a framework for finding chords in 5 different positions. So the roadblock that most people have is that some of the caged shapes are more theoretical than practical. I want to show you the theoretical or visual caged shapes and the practical caged shapes, the ones that pros really use. Let's use the chord A major as our example. This is the main chord of the progression that I'm going to show you. So I can play the open A chord, or the A shape of A. Next up is the G shape. So I take my G chord and I move it up 2 frets, G, G sharp, A. And I have to use my index finger like a capo at the 2nd fret. Now, this one's a real knuckle buster. I've never actually seen this in a song. I call this the theoretical or visual G shape. The practical G shape, the ones pros actually use regularly, looks more like this. Hendrix used to use that chord all the time. So notice that the A shape and the G shape contain several of the same notes. My A shape and my G shape both contain this little 3-note fragment. I think of the A shape and the G shape as basically 2 variations emanating from this one little shape. Next up is the E shape. So I think the full bar chord E is a pretty practical shape, but a lot of pros use this smaller fragment here, which many of you may recognize. It looks like an F chord. And sometimes people will wrap their thumb over and grab this bass note here on the low E string. So after the E shape comes the D shape. So if I take the E shape, this note right here is where the D shape starts. So that's the practical or visual D shape. But most pros just grab this grip, the same grip that we use for our regular D chord. So there's the D shape of A. Next up is the C shape. This is another one that's kind of impractical. Here's the full visual or theoretical C shape, but most pros use this fragment here. And you hear this a ton in different Rolling Stones songs. So notice that the D shape and the practical C shape contain 2 notes in common. This is another pair of shapes that I lump together because they share so many notes. And then I'm back to the A shape, 1 octave or 12 frets higher. Okay, so now let's put those shapes to use. The backing track that we're going to use is one that I created based on the solo section to the Steely Dan song, Reelin in the Years. There's a link in the description to this backing track and to a PDF of these caged shapes. This is a pretty simple progression. It's just G to A. Here's my simplified diagram of the practical caged shapes for these 2 chords. Because I see such a strong link between the A shape and the G shape and the D shape and the C shape, I just have them lumped together on this diagram. The first step with this is just learning how to play these practical caged shapes with the backing track. So the next step is where the magic happens. I'm going to use those same chord shapes that I was using before, but instead of playing them as chords, I'm going to play them one note at a time and make melodies out of those notes. One really important note. Don't hold these notes like a chord and just play them one note at a time. It won't sound very good. It will sound like you're holding a chord and picking it one note at a time. Use these notes just like you would a scale. You don't bar with your index finger when you're playing the pentatonic scale. It would sound really messy. So by the same token, we don't want to hold multiple notes down when we're playing these arpeggios. Playing arpeggios is really what we're talking about here. So if I take this E-shaped bar chord, for example, I don't want to play it like a bar chord. I just want to visualize it like a bar chord, and I want to play each note individually. So I'm using these cage shapes to visualize these arpeggios that are available to me. So does this work for more complicated progressions? Absolutely. Some friends and I recorded covers of unreleased Steely Dan songs. Some of these had quite complex chord progressions, but I approached them this exact same way. It's really how I approach every solo now, by focusing on the chord shapes. If you want to check out those videos, the link is in the description. So you can see how learning to visualize and actually use the cage shapes is the key to playing changes. Your next step is to practice this with the backing track. Start with playing the practical caged chord shapes first. Then when you're comfortable with that, start using those same shapes to solo with. But to really play like a pro, watch this video to take your playing to the next level.